What is going on, everybody? What is going on? The Catch fam, my name is John Dawson, and in today's video, we are breaking down 5 underdog pick'ems that I love going into week 2 of the 2023 fantasy football season. So, if you guys are new to the channel, all we do here is free fantasy football content all year round, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to subscribe on the way in. If you guys have any comments, questions, concerns pertaining to the 2023 fantasy football season, let me know down below. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. If you guys have any questions pertaining to underdog pick'ems moving into week 2, please let me know down below as well. Of course, if you guys are new to underdog fantasy, you can double your first deposit with promo code the catch, dollar by dollar up to $100. But other than all that, let's not waste any more time. Let's hop into today's video. All right, first overall, I'm going with Travis Kelce making his return, his NFL debut for the 2023 season here in week 2. His reception line currently set at 7 total receptions. Yeah, it might feel a little bit steep when you first glance at it, but man, I expect this Jaguars-Chiefs game to be a high-scoring affair. Chiefs coming off of a loss. The Jaguars look like they're firing on all cylinders. Both these defenses relatively mediocre in this type of game script. So I love Kelce moving into the weekend. And on top of that, Kelce had 7 or more receptions in every game last year except for 5. Plus, when we look at that week 1 performance by the Chiefs, I mean, let's face it, the wide receivers on this team were not looking very sharp. Mahomes is going to want to look to Kelce throughout this entire game. I absolutely love this line. I would take the higher on Kelce's receptions with confidence moving into week 2. All right, next up, sticking with the same matchup, Chiefs and Jaguars. I might be a sucker here, but I'm rolling with Christian Kirk at higher than 7.25 fantasy points. Listen, an absolute bummer out of Kirk in week 1. 3 targets, 1 reception for 9 receiving yards. Yeah, I get it. Not very promising. Calvin Ridley doing his thing. Zay Jones looked sharp. Evan Engram and Travis Etienne all look sharp. But hey, this is an offense that has a lot of good weapons, a great quarterback, a good system overall. The Jaguars are at home. The Chiefs are going to be bringing all the fire they possibly can. I mean, I like this matchup as a whole from a fantasy perspective and from a pick'em perspective moving into the week. But in regards to Christian Kirk, I think this line, it's about 2.5 points lower than it was last week. And I still really like Kirk. I mean, you look at last year, he had a couple games where he was an absolute dud. I mean, he had 9 or less points in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games last year. But other than that, he hit this mark or higher. I mean, much higher every other game of the season. So I like this game script for Kirk. I still believe in Kirk. He's one of my favorite offseason guys to go out and target where he was going in fantasy drafts. I still think he's going to be very productive this year. Week 1, it just wasn't his week. I think in week 2, he bounces back against the Chiefs in a high-scoring affair. I like this line for Kirk moving into week 2. All right, third overall, I'm rolling with Zay Flowers receiving yards at the higher, currently sit at 38.5 receiving yards. I mean, I'm a big Zay Flowers fan. I really liked him out of this rookie class, arguably my favorite wide receiver coming into the season. So I have a lot of, personal conviction in Zay Flowers. But when we look at week 1 against Houston, 10 targets, 9 receptions, 78 receiving yards. He outperformed Rashad Bateman and he outperformed Odell Beckham. Now, Mark Andrews might be back on the field for week 2. He was not out there in week 1. But ultimately, I still view Zay Flowers as a wide receiver 1. And I think, with Mark Andrews on the field, that could actually help Zay Flowers, even if he gets less targets, less receptions. I think this line sitting at almost half of what he did last week is a very solid line. Plus, I expect this game script against the Cincinnati Bengals to be a little bit more competitive than the one against the Texans. Not that the Texans ultimately played too poorly in week 1, considering, they were at the Ravens and everything, but I still like this matchup. Bengals coming up off a tough loss. Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, both these quarterbacks, big contracts in the offseason, have something to prove. Ultimately, I think Flowers, a very sharp line, sitting at the higher for 38.5 receiving yards as we approach week 2. And next on the list, I've got Nick Folk's field goal line over 1.5 field goals. I don't mind the 2 extra point made line. I don't mind 6.5 kicking points as well. But I mean, 5 field goals last week for Nick Folk. He made every single field goal. I mean, he knocked it out of the park in fantasy with 18 fantasy points. This man is a machine at the kicker position. And ultimately, I don't love taking kicker lines. In last week's video, we had Justin Tucker over 2.5 extra points. The Ravens were maybe looking at that line and decided to screw us, went for 2. Otherwise, we would have hit on Tucker's line last week. But I still think there's always good opportunities with these kicker lines, even if they're a little bit risky. But looking at what the Chargers did last week defensively, I mean, they were completely non-existent. So I expect the Titans to be able to put up points in this game. If you think they're going to be able to score enough touchdowns, you could take the extra points. But I think the field goal line is a good enough bet. I mean, this Titans offense, kind of weird. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins at the moment is questionable. If he doesn't play, I definitely like the field goal line. If he does play, I think you could take the extra point line. But either way, I think Nick Folk at the kicker position just has a good week. This Chargers offense looked awful against the Dolphins in week 1. And while the Titans might not have the best, offensive unit, that can still help a kicker like Nick Folk because maybe they get in field goal range but aren't able to finish off drive. So however you look at it, I like all 3 lines for Nick Folk, but right now, based off of the 5 field goals and 5 made field goals in week 1, I'll take the higher at 1.5 field goals moving in to week 2. All right, last on the list, I'm rolling with David Montgomery to score at least 1 touchdown against the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks unit is just not good against the run whatsoever. This is the Lions' first game at home. They came out booming in week 1, beat the Chiefs. I think they're going to come out booming against a Seattle team that struggled against the Rams in week 1. They gave up 3 rushing touchdowns to the Rams, 2 of them to the Rams' backup running back in Kyron Williams. So I like Monty. Listen, I think Gibbs is going to be great this year. We like Gibbs all offseason. I think he'll be a little bit more involved in week 2 potentially. But I still think Monty's going to get the ball at least 3 or 4 times around the goal line as long as the Lions can sustain some offensive drives. And I think he has a good shot to score a rushing touchdown against the Seattle run unit that is just really, really bad. So a little bit risky. We had this line in the video last week, if I'm not mistaken, and it hit. So, 2 weeks in a row feels like a little bit of a risk, but ultimately I still think this is a really good line as we move in to week 2. All right, guys, that's going to finish off the video. If you guys are new to Underdog Fantasy, don't forget they have a free line moving into week 2. Joe Burrow for 1 total yard, rushing, passing, doesn't matter. This is a smash play, a free play that they have been doing week in and week out to start the season. And of course, you can double your first deposit up to $100 with promo code THECATCH on the screen for you in the description down below as well. If you guys are new to the channel, I hope you enjoyed today's content. Be sure to subscribe on the way out and get in the comments down below if you guys have any thoughts on today's pick'ems, any questions about Underdog Fantasy, or any fantasy football questions moving into week 2. Please let me know down below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And with that, I will say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.